Thank you for joining the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston for our weekly online ministers forum. I'm the Reverend D. Scott Cooper, Assistant Minister of Congregational Life, filling in for Dr. Bosson. These forums were created to disseminate online science-based resources during the pandemic, and we have talked to community organizers, artists, scholars, religious leaders, and medical professionals about collectively addressing issues as they surfaced. As we end both the online ministers forums and Pride Month, we welcome Moises Serrano. If you're a watcher of documentaries, you will know him from the film Forbidden, Undocumented and Queer in Rural America. The documentary shows Moises' story of personal transformation as he faced significant hurdles because of his undocumented status, his sexuality, and the limited resources available living in a rural area. The film won both the Outfest Special Programming Award for Freedom and the Southern Poverty Law Center Social Justice Film Award. So, Moises, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh yeah, we're thrilled to have you. Before I do anything else, I have to just say that I watched the documentary and found it so compelling and teared up several times, and I sincerely hope everyone watching us now takes the opportunity to watch it. But I know everyone hasn't had the chance to see it yet. So tell us about your story and how you became an advocate for these groups who have been under attack.
Yeah, absolutely. My advocacy starts, I think, really the moment that I graduated from high school. I'm an undocumented student. I'm an undocumented immigrant living in North Carolina, and unfortunately, at that time when I graduated from high school in 2007, the community college systems, and so essentially, North Carolina, we have a centralized kind of community college public university system, and so the decision was made that they would bar all undocumented students from going to college. And so that was the very first huge roadblock and obstacle in my way. Here I was transitioning from a safe space. K through 12 is a universal right in the United States, guaranteed by the Supreme Court. So regardless of your immigration status, you're guaranteed an education. And for me, this was the first time in my life that I was transitioning out of a legally and federally protected zone into essentially the unknown, right? I was transitioning into a space that was where I would be illegalized, quote unquote. And so I think for me, my desire to push for change came out of that moment. Around 3 years later, with the Battle of the Dream Act, is when I decided to come out as undocumented publicly in North Carolina, in an effort to try to humanize these issues, right? To try to engage my fellow Americans and to hopefully educate them a little bit more on this issue so that they could contact their representatives in order to garner support for the Dream Act. Unfortunately, it was our very own Senator Kay Hagan who was one of the Democratic votes against the Dream Act, which was being blocked by the Republican majority at that time. But that was really the beginning of my journey. And what you see in the film, it starts a little bit later, about 1 to 2 years later, just showing my advocacy and my struggle in North Carolina, trying to fight for justice and equality.
You mentioned some of the political stuff going on. The film actually begins with some of the really hateful rhetoric of the former president. And I noticed the film reminds us of several political milestones like marriage equality and how, after all this time, some of us kind of forget what a huge deal that was. I mean, growing up, it never occurred to me that I would be able to get married and have a husband. But people also forget that it's under the Clinton administration that the Defense of Marriage Act was passed, and there were a record number of deportations during the Obama administration. So rights have been under attack for a long time under both parties.
Exactly. Unfortunately, what has been a unifying subject for both the Democratic parties and the Republican parties has been their support for anti-immigrant legislation. And so that's something that you see very clearly in the film, right? I think we do kind of, the filmmakers decided to ground this film with the hateful rhetoric that was coming out of the 2016 election. But in the film, what it takes you through is actually the lived experiences of myself and my family through two Obama administrations, right? The terror that I'm feeling in the documentary wasn't under a Trump administration. It was under an Obama administration. And I think that's what's the most insidious part and the most difficult part of this job is the insidiousness of the Obama administration, because on paper they seemed very progressive and in his speech and in his rhetoric he was very pro-immigrant, but not in his policies, and he was deporting thousands of people.
Yeah, it's just amazing because unless you were really paying attention to what was going on, that sort of flew by you.
Exactly, and I understand the allure and I understand the appeal of that. I remember being, in my bedroom and watching the day that Barack Obama got elected president of the United States, and it was such a historical moment. I was so inspired. I was filled with hope and with illusion. And I think there's an allure to that, right? That we think that because we elect someone into office, our work is over. But essentially, our work has only just begun during that time, right? Because now it's time to hold those politicians accountable.
Exactly, and I think you make that point in the film where you talk about it, making sure stuff gets done after people get elected is where our work begins.
Exactly.
Also, I know there were several scenes of, and this made me happy, of really supportive faith community leaders at rallies, and also people quoting the Bible about welcoming the stranger and the immigrant, which of course, there are a lot of those those verses in the Bible, and they seem to be ignored by people who want to ignore them. So I was wondering, was your faith community important while all this was going on? Has that historically in your life been something that's been important to you, and as you were becoming a vocal advocate for these things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you mentioned, right, the faith community does have an environment and messaging around being pro-immigrant, and so I never really had difficulty with that. A lot of our greatest allies in North Carolina were the faith communities for my immigrant rights organization at that time. I think what was difficult was actually kind of negotiating parts of who you are and parts of your identity in order to not burn bridges. And so in North Carolina, especially again in very rural areas, as you may know, you don't really have the luxury to choose who your allies are, right? You don't have the luxury to burn down bridges. That was kind of the difficulty that I experienced in North Carolina is I did see the importance, especially in the faith-based communities with immigrant rights, but then not every single faith-based community I could talk to about LGBTQ issues. And so that was difficult, again, just negotiating what parts of your identity and what parts of your humanity are more important in different spaces.
As a Unitarian Universalist, we're progressive on a lot of different issues, and it's exactly what you just said, where we want to work with people on the things they agree with us on, and we find ourselves working with people on not just immigrant rights, but poverty issues and homelessness and all those things. And like you said, a lot of times they don't agree with us on LGBTQ plus things, or certainly abortion and any number of things. So in the Houston area, that's an issue, just as you're saying, that you had to deal with.
Exactly.
I also grew up in a rural area. I also grew up a gay kid who thought I may be the only one in the world.
Yes, I know that feeling.
So after you decided to be public and unashamed, and I watched you speak, I just thought I never could have done anything like that. I mean, of course, there were differences. My parents were born in this country, and it was many years. I'm much older than you are, but I was just so impressed by what you were able to do. Of course, sometimes we don't know we can do something until we just care enough and go ahead and do it. So I'm sure there are young people who watch what you do. What would you tell them about leadership and speaking out to make a difference?
I think first of all, I think I'll speak directly to the immigrant community. I didn't become an activist because I wanted to. I became an activist because I had to. And I think the difference here is that we need to understand that no one will come and fight for your rights, right? That it is really up to you to fill these leadership positions, and I think that there's different sayings and different ways we can put this, but the change starts with you. And so yeah, I always knew that I wanted that my dreams, my aspirations wouldn't be stopped by an immigration status. I always knew that my goal was to go to college, to get an education, and to have a better life, because that's why I was brought here. And so I knew that my dreams couldn't be contained, and regardless of what my own country was telling me, I just kept believing in myself. And I think that is crucial, and that's really important, especially as you mentioned, to LGBTQ kids living in rural areas who think that they're the only ones in the entire world. Believe in yourself, because unfortunately not many people will, or no one will, and not that that's okay, but I think the only person that you have that you can trust is yourself. And so know your strengths, know your talents, believe in your talents and in your skills, and push yourself. And as you said, you never know you can do something until you do it. I never imagined becoming this public advocate. I just knew that I wanted to share my story and to engage again in dialogue and try to change people's minds. I find that the best way to battle misinformation is to just have a conversation about things. This documentary, I never imagined that it would grow to have the impact that it did. And so all of this really just came from one moment, which was me sharing my story. And that was another kind of issue that I would like to touch on for young people today, is that you need to go out there and advocate for these issues, and to network and to talk with people. You never know in what different direction it will pull you. The director, Tiffany Reinhardt, I met her serendipitously. Her and I had no previous connection, and she was kind of moved after listening to my story, and I remember her saying that she never had to think about her citizenship as an additional layer of privilege. And so that really put her out of her comfort zone, and that's what made her stick around and want to do this film. So I think all that I can say is believe in yourself, believe in your skills, and get out there and share your story and meet people, and you'll never know where you will end up.
That's great. I think people don't always realize that you can cite statistics and all sorts of historical facts and whatever all day long, but it's personal stories that really compel people to take interest in something and want to do something about that. So people sharing their stories, what you just said.
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer in your story of self. No one knows your story better than you do. And so for me, again, especially the anti-immigrant narrative has such a stronghold over our culture and over the national dialogue and politics. And I think what's so important is to break that down, to humanize it, much like the LGBTQ movement did. And that's what the immigrant rights community did, is they actually borrowed coming out of the closets. They turned that into coming out of the shadows when you reveal your lack of an immigration status. And so, again, this issue won't change until it hits close to home.
They say nothing is more liable to change someone's mind as actually knowing someone who's gay, and apparently same thing with people who were here undocumented, whose parents came.
Exactly.
So you talked about coming here to get an education, make a better life. Just today, I saw on TV a commercial for one of these genealogy apps. And having just watched your documentary, I was so struck because the whole thing was this woman talking about her grandfather or great-grandfather coming here through Ellis Island and wanting to make a better life for himself, and how he was her hero. And I thought, these are the very things they're denigrating. people not from Europe for doing? How did this get so
Exactly.
messed up?
I keep hearing, Mexicans just, we just immigrated in the wrong century, essentially. Um, because I think, again, had my parents done this, in the 1800s, it would have been different. But I think that's a great point. Even the creation of whiteness is such a recent phenomena and such a recent social construction. Let's remember, even in the mid 1900s and early 1900s, the migration from Eastern Europe was banned to the United States. Right, no, the United States didn't want Eastern Europeans; they wanted Western Europeans only. And so, again, this issue has been an issue that has been raised since the foundation of this country. Right, the United States has a long history of using our immigration system for racial purposes, as in banning people that they deem as racially inferior than Western Europeans and now white Americans.
And of course, here in Texas, that that used to be part of Mexico, it puts a whole different spin on where the border is and was and should be.
Again, it's just incredible that I think that we're so fixated on who is deserving, because at the end of the day, I think that's the question that we are asking ourselves, right? Who deserves to be here? And what we have seen constantly throughout history is really it's only Western Europeans. And so I think it's really up to all of us to really challenge that notion. And that's why during these talks I talk about how our immigration system is not broken. It's actually working perfectly the way that it was set up to. It was set up to exclude people like my family, who was the most impacted by NAFTA, but economic policy is being spearheaded by the United States. And so I think, again, if anyone deserves to be here, it's the people who are being impacted globally by our foreign and economic policies.
Again, there continues to be no shortage of bills at the federal and state level suppressing minorities, the undocumented, in their ability to vote. Not to mention what you just said about it's working the way it was set up to work. So give us an update on the current status of immigration reform.
Right, and what I would like to just quickly remind people, is that Congress hasn't passed an immigration reform since 1986, and Congress is the only body of government that can provide a pathway towards citizenship. Barack Obama didn't do that with DACA, right? DACA is just a 2-year reprieve from deportation and a work permit. That's it. There's no pathway, there's no naturalization attached to DACA. And so Congress really has to come together and pass a bipartisan legislation. And so what that would look like, I think, is really up in the air. I think what my bill would look like if I propose something, it would look like something like citizenship within 3 to 5 years for most people. Again, we need a pathway towards naturalization that doesn't leave anyone behind, that is not a 10 to 15 year pathway. My parents are 60 years old, right? They don't need to be 75, 76 by the time that they're U.S. citizens. And so I think that's something that I'm looking out for. I also really am strongly against any type of more militarization of the border, more funding to private prisons that house undocumented immigrants. The private prison complex has seen a boom, especially under the Trump administration and the Obama administration. I would like to see the defunding of the border wall, the deconstruction of the border wall. Again, all of this money we could be pouring into our schools, into our communities. And so, unfortunately, an immigration reform package right now hasn't even been proposed. There have been bills proposed, but nothing major. Nothing is really gaining momentum right now in Congress. And so that's something that worries me, and it worries a lot of advocates nationally, is that what will we really realistically be able to do under 4 years of the Biden administration. So again, we have to keep fighting, and we have to be on the lookout for an immigration reform package when it comes.
Sadly, it looks like, at least to some of us here in Texas, that some of the hateful policies of the Trump administration are being taken up by governors. Our governor is touting building the border wall when the schools need money. Uninsured citizens are just huge numbers of people who are uninsured. Our power grid is a national joke. And so, they're focused on these racist and hateful things that just make absolutely no sense.
Absolutely. And I think that's the point. It doesn't make sense, but it divides us and it creates,
Right.
sensationalism. I think what the United States has always been really good at is at crafting an enemy and creating an enemy. And it's been really good at funding resources to stop this enemy and to detain this enemy and to deport this enemy, right? When the real enemies are the people who wrecked our economy, right? And at Wall Street and walked away scot-free. The real enemies are the politicians in DC who are long career politicians and who have enacted no change whatsoever. And so I think for me, absolutely, the battle is at a state level, and that's why I would encourage your audience and anyone who watches this video is to get involved locally. So much of an undocumented immigrant's life can be dictated at a state level. So as you probably have seen and know, driver's licenses, in-state tuition, cooperation with 287G contracts, so cooperation with ICE, secure communities. All of these things are dictated at a state level, so it's really important that people not only pay attention to the presidential elections, but you need to be voting for the people who are representing you in Congress in Texas, so the Texas General Assembly or the legislature. Who are you voting for at a county level? Because that's extremely important. That's what we have actually seen in North Carolina is people are not paying attention to local elections, and so what that leads to is to the elections of sheriffs who are cooperating with ICE.
You anticipated my next question. I was going to ask what people can do to make a difference, and definitely it's pay attention locally, because that's where a lot of this stuff happens and where we can really make a difference on so many of these things.
I'm sure Houston must have a few immigrant rights organizations just in the city, right? So nationally, you can look to United We Dream. They're a national immigrant-led organization. The National Immigration Law Center also provides a lot of great work around immigration reform nationally, and so they break down all of these kind of complex policies and laws, and they're just a great organization if you want to keep track of what is moving on immigration reform in DC. But be involved locally with your local churches, with your local organizations. They are the ones who need your support the most.
There's always work to be done, helping out there, and like you said, I think even especially here in Houston, because we're closer to the border, and there's a lot going on here, and a lot that we can help out with down here. So you were talking about websites, and I hope people do Google some of those organizations that you mentioned. I did want to mention that they can go to forbiddendoc.com to find out more about the documentary, which, as I said, was just incredibly compelling. And I found it just on Amazon Prime and watched it, and I totally recommend it.
Definitely the shout out for the documentary. Yeah, it's free if you have Amazon Prime. It's also available on Canopy. So Canopy is kind of a Netflix style streaming service for public universities and libraries now. So a lot of local libraries are carrying kind of a Canopy subscription. So if you don't go to college or if you don't have access to a public university and you don't have Amazon Prime, I would check with your local library and see if you can watch the film through Canopy with a K. And definitely visit our website and visit our Facebook page.
Oh, you have a Facebook page too. Oh, well, I'm going to go find that then as well. Well, not to give away the ending, but you were going to college near the end of the film. Catch us up on what's been happening with you ever since then.
Absolutely. I graduated from Sarah Lawrence College in 2018. It was the shortest and the longest 4 years of my life. There were moments that I loved it, but I think there were also moments where I just didn't know if that was the right place for me. I think the election of Trump really was really difficult. I was isolated. I didn't know anyone in New York City. I didn't have any friends or family there, and so having to live through such a traumatic moment, and I know not just for me, but for millions of other people around this country, it was very difficult. But fortunately, again, I graduated with a degree in public policy, focusing on immigration law and immigration policy. I'm really, again, interested in how we construct human beings through policy and through law. I think, again, an immigration status is like race. It doesn't exist, right? It's constructed. And so that's what really interests me. I've been working on a couple of projects since then. I worked with a bluegrass band called Apalache, who the front runner I know through another event that I had done in North Carolina. His name is Joe Troop, and so he was inspired by my story and my advocacy, and finally we got together and we wrote this song called "The Dreamer." It was fortunate enough to be included in the Grammy nominated album of theirs. So I was actually invited to, I think it was the 2019 Grammys right before COVID hit.
Wow.
2019, 2020 Grammys, I believe. And so that was incredible. I also was very fortunate to be able to write the script for the music video, which Rolling Stone called one of the best music videos of country music videos of 2019. And so I continue to try to be involved in arts and culture, and my goal is to try to change the narrative and change how we share our stories and who shares our stories, and to try to construct us in a different way. And I try to do that right now through the arts. And so people can check out the music video on YouTube. It's called The Dreamer. I hope to continue to do both advocacy, but also continue to work in creating more art for and by undocumented people.
That's amazing. Of course, being from Kentucky, I have friends who are bluegrass musicians, so I can't wait to go find the video.
Yeah, that's incredible. I really hope you enjoy it, and if you're able to share it with your congregation. Again, I'm very proud of it, not because it's me, but a beautiful team of people came together because they believed in this story, and they all donated their time, their equipment.
Wow.
The music video was shot in the course of 3 days. Everyone volunteered for it. It was really an act and a labor of love, and so you can really see that in the music video. And I try to keep myself out of it as much as possible, because this isn't just my story; it's the story of millions of people. And so I really hope that it resonates with your audience and with your congregation.
I can't thank you enough for being with us. Your story is compelling, as I said, and you're an amazing person, and I so appreciate you spending this time with me answering my questions. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Reverend.
Sure. So for those of you who are with us on the Ministers Forum for the first time, let me say a few words about Unitarian Universalism. We are a religious tradition that celebrates the possibility of goodness within each human heart, the transformative power of love, and the clarifying force of reason. We believe that we need not think alike to love alike. We hope that you have found these forums a source of connection, hope, and clarity. If you found this video to be helpful, please consider joining us for our weekly worship services, Sunday at 9:30 and 11:30. Upcoming sermons will continue to be posted on our YouTube channel, where you can find past forums and worship services. Thank you to our staff for making this video possible. It was produced by Christian Holmes. Alma Viscara assisted with the editing. We will see you all in person soon, and please remember that no matter how isolated you feel, we are all in this together.